Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. As the Scots would say, you'll have had your tea. So you're now all primed for the afternoon session. And it's a special session, special full afternoon session on sustainable mobility for the future. Now, anyone who's sat in what seems to be the 24-hour traffic jam at the moment to come in from the airport here in Delhi, or indeed anyone who's tried to get around any of our major cities, west or east, will know that we've got a tinsy-wincy bit of a problem with mobility. And that's even before we wrestle with how to get around more sustainably. Now, the optimists among us, and I count myself as one, think that if we could take a more sustainable approach to mobility, we can kill two birds with one stone. We can get places faster and do so cleaner and greener as well. And we do need to. I mean, it's a pretty sad indictment of 6,000 years of human civilization if the best we can do is spend half our lives stressing and hooting in tiny metal boxes. So can't we do better than this? Well, the answer is, of course we can. And we're about to hear just how from our experts this afternoon. If I can invite our first panel up onto the stage. They're going to be talking about the global mobility paradigm. We're going to have Mr. Anthony Eggert, who's director of the ClimateWorks Foundation, Mr. Roland Hwang, who's managing director, Climate and Clean Energy Program at the Natural Resources Defense Council, His Excellency André Corrêa de Lago, who's the ambassador of Brazil to India, Mr. Tim Ashby, who's the director of the under 2 degrees, as opposed to under 2 years of age, I hope, under 2 degrees Coalition Secretariat at the Climate Group. And our chair is Professor Geetam Tiwari, who's the Ministry of Urban Development Chair and Professor of Transport Planning at the Department of Civil Engineering at IIT Delhi. And before I hand over to Professor Tiwari, I'd like to invite our special guest speaker this afternoon, Mr. Shri Prakash, who's a distinguished fellow at TERI, who's going to set all this in context for us. Mr. Shri Prakash, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to the Professor Geetam Tiwari and other distinguished panelists, as well as distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, as Martin said, I am also optimist. Though minimum 2 hours of my travel every day is spent in my car. I live almost about 35 kilometers from where I work, and then so much time normally it takes. Now, the sustainable mobility, we know all of us know what are the current issues plaguing the mobility of both passengers as well as the goods. And the problem is deteriorating day by day, not only for the increasing carbon emission, but also the air pollution which is caused. And in fact, those who live in Delhi, and I have been in Delhi for almost about 35 years, we have seen that how the air has become bad or worse or sometimes hazardous in all the cities, including Delhi. Now, when we talk about the carbon emission, carbon emission world over, it is about roughly, transportation sector contributes about 25%. In India, it is still less, but that does not mean that we are not able to going to that in that direction. And this is basically because of our heavy dependence on the fossil fuels. Almost all the energy which is used for transportation, it comes from the fossil fuels. And the bad part is that the bulk of the increasing carbon emission would come from the developing countries, because the new infrastructure is getting developed, and the governments in developing countries, including emerging economies, building a lot of infrastructure, and this is particularly road. which are needed, because a large number of the areas are still need access. In this country itself, there is a number of the areas, and we have got the massive programs for connecting them, almost all the habitats. But even today, there are some areas, particularly in hills and the remote areas, which are not connected. And with the roads, building the expressways, with the national highways, etc., we also see the massive motorization. And gradually, though we have been largely still dependent on the public transportation, but gradually the motorization is at such a fast pace, 7 to 8% in emerging economies like India, as compared to the world average of less than 3%. Now, the one more important aspect in this is, if you see three modes, mainly the air, railways, and road. Of course, the railway is the most environment friendly. But over the years, particularly there, in fact, I am a career railwayman, I know that in last 30, 40 years, the investments in railways, not only in this country, except that for last few years it has increased. The investments have been made much less. The reason being it that at that particular time we had decided that investment should be done only on when the projects are financially viable. Now recently, for last 6 years, the Indian Railways are making a lot of investments for increasing their capacity, augmenting their capacity, because today there are a number of routes where even the demand is there, but we are not able to meet the demand of freight as well as passengers. Now, I have given you the current status. Well, a lot of efforts are being made. In fact, today we are going to discuss, there will be two panel discussions. One will be discussing about the global mobility paradigm, what is happening in all over the world, and also in the developing countries, because the issues of the transportation is much more different in developing countries than in the developed countries. In developed countries, the new investments in infrastructure comes only when there is a new technology comes, or like high-speed rail, or when there is a congestion. But in developing countries, the investment on infrastructure is much higher, because we have to provide, and governments have to provide the access, which is very important, and that is why a lot of road developments are taking place. Now, with that, as I mentioned, that there are the problems not only increasing carbon emission but also as a pollution. Well, what will the future like? Will the future be bleak? Of course not, because there are so many changes that are taking place. Many disruptions are taking place. The electric mobility we are talking about, and then gradually the electric mobility is also becoming success, not only in the developed countries, but also in the developing countries. We have a massive program for electric mobility. Railways are getting rejuvenated in many countries. Investments are being made there, not only in India, but other countries as well. And of course, apart from this, there are the new disruptions, that technology, etc., which are coming up. And I don't think that future is as bleak as it used to be thought. Now, with all this, what are these technology changes which are taking place? How will the future look like? And a study which I have seen which says that the electric mobility, shared mobility, as well as automation may bring down the carbon emission by over 80%. So say that is a, and not not in the recent future, but maybe in the by 2050. But these are the promises which are there, and the future would be bright, particularly for sustainable mobility, if we take right decisions. Thank you very much.